Hello, theme park enthusiasts, and welcome back to Planet Coaster and to the Warner Brothers Resort Citywalk. So, in this episode, I'm going to pretty much finish up the buildings that we have laid out so far. And so I'm building the other hotel that's going to be a part of the city walk here. This one's going to be a more kid-themed hotel and have some amenities that are more for the kids. So I'm putting in a pathway here, just a nice large pathway to get over to the area, setting up the monorail because, again, just like the Grand Hotel, this hotel is not going to be really designed on the inside. It's simply going to be here as a functional thing as both the hotel and for the monorail station. So with that, I'll be putting in another full door onto the building, and I won't be detailing the inside of the building. I will tell you, I have actually completed the city walk at this point. The last episode for it will be coming out next week. Then there's going to be a break on the channel from Planet Coaster. And that is not to say that I'm not going to be playing Planet Coaster. I'm just not going to be posting what I'm doing right now. Because I have plans for the Warner Brothers Studios park, and I want to get at least the first land of the park fully done before I actually start to publish it on the YouTube channel. So with that, there is going to be another game that I've already got in mind that's going to sort of take over the day that is Planet Coaster for right now, and I'll be playing through that. But do know I am playing Planet Coaster in the background, and I will be getting the content out to you once it's ready. I will say it is going to be a while before that occurs, though, because what I have in mind for the Warner Brothers Studios is going to be very extravagant, and it's going to take a lot of time to design the rides and put in the detail that I want. With that being said, also, I did find with this park, when I finished it here, that I actually had some struggles going on as far as just when the guests were in, it was really juddery. So I ended up having to lower the amount of guests to only 100 guests in the park at a time. Not exactly where I wanted to be, but it's just one of those that with all the different pieces I used, it seems like my computer wasn't able to handle it. It's an unfortunate thing, but especially with these parks, especially with the Studios Park, and particularly this first section of the park, which is what inspired me to do all of this, I'm going to put in the detail that I want in it. I'm not going to cut any corners. There will be some buildings, like I have some restaurants planned and such, that are not going to be done on the inside because it's a restaurant. So that's fine. But as far as the detail that I do want to have in the park, it's going to be there. And if that means that, it's not going to be able to hold as many guests, then so be it. That's the way it might be. Another thing I've thought about with it is I very well may break the Universal or the Warner Brothers Studios park into multiple pieces. Sort of slipped there and said Universal, and I probably will with this upcoming series quite a bit. Because the fact is, as I said, it is sort of inspired by Universal Studios. It is using properties that are Warner Brothers instead of Universal's, but it is going to pay homage in some ways to the Universal Studios park because it's going to be based around the films and such. With that, though, as I said, I may break it up into doing different parks for each of the different lands. I'll have sort of the connecting entrance area and such, and I might do that as one section and then do each of the different parks as its own little area. That will sort of depend on how it ends up running. We'll see after I get the first section entirely done how it's running, if I can even have guests in the park, or if they're going to just make it lag so badly that it won't work. Those are questions I'll have to find out once I finish that section, which is, again, why I am going to sort of do that off of YouTube for right now, get it entirely done, and then you will see it on a weekly basis once I've fully created it. Here, though, let's get back into what we're doing in this particular episode. So for this episode, as I said, I started making this hotel here. I started out with stucco because I sort of like the look of it, and then I realized, it didn't exactly fit what I was wanting for this hotel. I sort of had an idea in mind that I wanted for something that was sort of kids-themed, but I wanted it to be whimsically kids-themed, and thus the blue color I felt like really works well for this. So with that, I switched over to the stonework here, and that will be what I'm going with because of these corners here. I wanted to do some turrets on it because this is going to be a castle-themed hotel. As I said, it is for the little kids, so what kid isn't going to want to stay in a castle? We're taking off, I guess, a little bit from Disney in this way, but the thing is, the castle is not going to be at the actual parks. It's going to be over here on the side. I will possibly have a hotel in one of the parks, and it's going to be a nice hotel, but it is not going to be castle oriented. For the Studios Park, there will be sort of a central fixture, I will say. I don't want to give away too many ideas or anything right now. It will be a structure, but it is definitely not going to be castle themed. It will be something straight out of the Warner Brothers content. So with this, I didn't want this to be specifically Looney Tunes. I mean, there definitely is some homages to Looney Tunes with the castle structure and such. A lot of the cartoons did have a castle. I believe it was Yosemite Sam that would sometimes be a knight and such and would face Bugs Bunny. And there was a dragon that they would have sometimes. But I just wanted it to be overall a kid-friendly castle. So here, I had these corners on, and then I thought about them, and I felt like they were a bit on the small side. So I go ahead and delete all the corners, and I come in and put in these larger turrets for the corners. Because really, if this was a fully functional hotel, if this was sort of the, if this was actually real, my thought process for this would be that each of these corners would have multiple. This would be sort of where the luxury accommodations would be. You would have these sort of octagonal rooms with windows out the sides, and especially the ones at the very top of the castle there would be able to overlook the land quite well. So that's sort of the mentality I have here, is these are sort of the very nice rooms within the hotel, is these octagon corners. And maybe at the ground floor, this might be where a restaurant would be or something of that nature as well. So, changing out the corners here, putting in these. This episode, I really got a lot done this week. I mean, last week I struggled some. The week before actually was the worst one there with being sick and such. But I was able to get a ton done this week for this episode, and I'm very proud of it. Here what I'm doing is I'm just putting out some floors so I can make sure that each of the corners is level. It sort of plays tricks on the eyes sometimes as far as how tall things are. And so the easiest way I found is just to put something that's sort of nice and on level. Then you can delete the flooring there, and now you know that if you put them to that exact height, you're actually getting exactly what you're wanting there. So I'll work from the top down on these turrets just to make sure that I get them exactly where I want them. And even though it's on the interior, I can't help myself to a point. I do want some detail there. So with this episode, as I said, we're going to get this hotel done. We're going to get the sort of backyard area of the hotel done with the different entertainment possibilities for the guests. And we're also going to work on the streets to get those finished. Because for right now, we've just got actual functional paths going on. I want to go ahead and make them sort of how they're going to look so that they look nice overall for the park with the lighting and everything that they're going to have to them. Here, I just wanted to make sort of a themed structure at the very top, just so guests coming into the place would be able to see it and such. So we've got some nice torches there, as well as a night guarding. And I wanted to put it on all four corners, so all I ended up doing is just copying those items over and rotating them appropriately so that they're looking into both the front and the back of the hotel. Then I rotated the flags. Even though they are blowing in different directions, it's a fictional fantasy place, so that's okay. They're not actually going to be movable flags, they're going to be just sort of solid objects that are in place there. Then here at the front of the hotel, we've got some different knights that are going to be marching back and forth, guarding the hotel on the roof. It's not exactly where you would guard from, but you get what I'm meaning. And we put some flags as a background there, and then we will also have some torches to light up this area as well. And then same as I did with the turrets, we'll go ahead and take this entire little design and we will move it to the back of the building here. So that way if you're in the backyard, you also see the same thing. I was hoping to get the knights sort of set where they would be spaced out properly. It wasn't working, so I just sort of left them. Now we're putting the sign onto the building here, and we will get the name of the place, which is going to be the Kiddy Kastle. Yes, I know it's misspelled. That is intentional, because once again, it's a whimsical place for children. So I just wanted something very simple, straightforward. I'm trying my best not to use things that are actually named out in the real world, and you will see that in next week's episode, where we built the final area of the City Walk. The name for it is something that I struggled with a bit because I wanted to find something that wasn't a name used just overall for a location. And it took me a little bit. Here, we're just putting some windows on the entire structure. First, I put windows all the way down, and then I think, they're too close together. Let's go ahead and delete every other one, so that way there's a bit more spacing, and they just look appropriate on the castle. As I said, these would be sort of the luxury rooms, but the fact is whoever has the very top one has the most luxurious view because you have windows all the way around on each of the turrets. Then I just wanted to light up the sign a little bit, so we've got some nice torches there by the sign. Just adjusted them slightly because I wouldn't want them burning the sign, even though pretty much anywhere where I'm using fire in the park, we're not using real fire. My thought would be the sort of electronic flames. That way it gives the view of fire, but at the same time it doesn't make it where it's dangerous to the guests or cost gas or just heat things up overall. So just want to make it sort of nice, but at the same time functional. So here we're taking the same fencing that we used over by the Grand because I really like the way that came out, and I think it works and just is something I'm going to use throughout the City Walk, as you will see later in the episode. And am just fencing off this area, so that way people who are not at the hotel can't get into this area. This is for hotel guests only. Originally here I put in pathing, and I thought about it later. This pathing is going to be covered over, unlike the sort of walking park that's at the back of the Grand. The Grand one is just sort of a quaint area for people to just enjoy on their own. This one, this back area, is going to be housing a couple of things that are specific to the hotel guests here, and I wanted to ensure that it was sort of a nice area off to itself. Now here I'm putting in some doors that will not actually be used, but I'm putting them into the coffee shop, the arcade, and the movie theater already had its own doors. And the reason for it is, just like with the Grand having access to the nightclub for adults, this hotel for the children is going to have private access to the movie theater, arcade, and coffee shop. Though the coffee shop is probably more for the adults as well. But this way, the sort of storyline I'm going with it is you can get to the movies and stuff without having to go through the general public, and you get sort of private preferential treatment with it. Now here, as I said, I was struggling with the different roads and such. I put in sort of a painted road there for right now, and what I will end up coming and doing here is, in the end, I will end up deleting all these paths because I realized I don't actually care for guests to walk back here. It just has to look like they can walk back here because they won't be using the things that are back here anyways. And as I said, that's one of those things I'm still working on and still getting to play around with in Planet Coaster, and I'm going to hopefully do a lot more of that with the Studios Park. I want to make it where it is appearing functional even for the things that aren't really functional. Though I will say, with the amount of capabilities it will take up for the Studios Park, I'm not going to put in a lot of non-functioning items. Almost everything's going to be usable in the park or it won't be included. And there are things I'm going to have to think about, like line queues and stuff, of do I care to actually design those if they're inside a building, because that is going to take away from what I can do in other places. So here I'm putting in some water, and I get these pieces over here. As you can see, they're pool pieces. Now, they work okay. The problem with them is they were all put in as one asset, and so because of that, you'd have to sort of try to cut and paste different pieces, and it didn't really work out well. So what I did instead is I went and found a pool that somebody had already designed. I really liked this one. I felt it was sort of adult in nature, but kids would still enjoy it. So I thought it worked as a nice compromise for the kids and the adults in the area. I did struggle with getting it set at a level that I liked, particularly because it sort of digs around the pool then with the lake, and I did want the water in it, so it actually is filled. So you'll see me here moving it around quite a bit. I actually deleted it at one point because I actually lifted up a bit higher, so I do go ahead and delete it and make adjustments in that way. I will say I have now put this park onto the workshop. So if you are on Steam and you want to play around with it, this park is out there. Perhaps your computer has some better capabilities than mine, and with that, you're able to actually have more guests in it than I'm running. Right now, I've got it as only 100 guests coming into the park because of just the amount of stuff that I put in. This pool definitely doesn't help, and what I put in next week, without a question, does not help. It really takes up quite a bit, and that's okay. As I said, this one is more about the design. This is not really intended to be a functional park. It's a city walk. It's basically supposed to get you to the park. And so with that, I just wanted to create it so it sort of answers the question of what it is that you're coming into the Studios Park on and such. So that way when you see the monorail and you see the gondola and such coming into the park, you'll understand why that they're there. Now here, I've got the pool sort of where I want it. I'm just sort of filling in around it, and then I am extending the faux pathway they have here from the pool, and that gets me thinking, why am I using real paths here? Nobody's going to come back here and use these. These aren't real things in the back. So instead of having that, let me just go ahead. At first here I decide, let me clean up the pathways. But then what I'll end up doing here is I'll just decide, let me just delete these pathways. They're not really necessary for this to be the area that I want it to be. As I said, still living and learning some with Planet Coaster, and I think that's one of those things that makes the game fun. You have to sort of learn and figure out how you want things to work over time. So here, just putting in the path over top of the path, now I think is the point where I realize, you know what, I just don't even need the path underneath it. Let me just delete all of that. And so I get rid of it here, and then all I end up doing is just simply connecting the roofing that I'm using as a pathway to the different areas. It looks like there's a path, but it actually doesn't work. Then there are a couple of corners that just don't want to line up perfectly, and I'll deal with those here in a few moments just to make them look a bit prettier. That's what I will say. I feel like this particular park, if you want to call it that, or the city walk, is probably my most detailed design. I really like the sort of combination I hit here of using things off the workshop that other people have done, because people have done fantastic work, and there's no reason not to use what they've created instead of trying to reinvent the wheel myself, and then combining that with doing my own design and using those things in a certain way. So here's the other element that I wanted to add to this backyard, is they're going to have their own private playground. Yes, there is a play area over on the other side, but they don't have direct access to it, and I wanted them to have their own private play area here with some swings and some different climbing apparatuses, some wobbly bridges, those kind of things. Then I'm just going to put some mulch in underneath here, so that way it's nice and safe for the kids, as is normally the case with these kind of play areas. So we'll get that all set up. We'll move a little bit of extra mulch around the side here, so that way we don't have these rounded corners all the way around. I'm not going to make it exactly perfect, and that is actually intentional because of the fact that the mulch over time would move and such. I don't have any barriers around it, and so it would just sort of go where it's going to go kind of thing. So having things be exactly squared off just wouldn't be too realistic. So there are some spots where there's missing mulch. There are some spots where it's not completely straight. That is intentional. It's not that I was being lazy with this. I actually could have gotten it straighter if I had wanted to. But as I said, I'm very pleased with the way this came out. It really is showing for me the direction I want to go in with my design overall. So with these corners here, since I couldn't get them to work exactly, I went ahead and just put a potter plant in them. I really am going with the mentality that if you have an issue in the game, then make it a feature instead of letting it be an issue. And you'll see that in next week's episode also, because there are a few areas where I had some issues with getting corners and stuff exactly straight on some lines that I put in. And so instead of making it a hassle or an issue, I made it a feature. So here we have these plants. They work perfectly fine for those areas. Here, just want to add a little bit more mulch. And now we are to the point where the castle area, as far as I'm concerned, is pretty much done. The only thing we have left to do is to put in lighting around the area. Because even though this isn't going to be used, again, I want it to be looking like it could be used. So I put in these low lights here just so that we have them. Basically, I put them at all the corners, and then I come back through and sort of randomly sprinkle them where I felt they were needed to sort of take care of the dark. Now, I am all about security, and once again, this is not, especially this location, is not one where guests are going to leave when the parks close and such. This is one where they're going to be staying overnight, and people could walk out here at nighttime. And I don't want them to be in danger when they do walk out here. So with that, I want it to be nice and well lit. So there is a lot of lighting there. I started putting those type of lights here, and I just didn't like how they looked. So I went through, started looking at different lights. Started with these here, but I didn't like them for a couple reasons. For one, when they're near the monorail, they're too tall. So they were actually going to interfere with the actual running of the device. So instead, I went with these Victorian style lights, which I felt were whimsical, especially in the color pattern of the blue and the gold. I felt like it really worked well for them. And then all I'm doing here is copy and pasting them over, so that way I can keep the spacing going as I head it. And then in the certain cases, like up by the hotel, just putting a few extra. Then all I do, copy and paste them again, and move them to the other side of the street. So both sides of the street are well lit, but down the middle, there was a lack of light. So there we go, we put some down the middle. And then all we're doing is we're going to just continue copy and pasting them all the way down this area. Few had gone inside the studio's gondola ride there, so I removed those. Here, again, I'm using the spacing of the actual pillars for the monorail as my sort of measuring stick, and then copy and pasting them over to the other side. Now, the ones that are down the center of the street would have caused a collision issue with guests and such. So you'll see here in a little bit, what I end up doing is I make sort of a circle out of curbs, and I sink those circles into the ground so that they are actually below where the guests will walk and such. And so that way, they actually do work as far as I saw in the game, that the people avoid them. They actually do treat them as an obstacle, which is perfect. So here I am just putting the lights, and I decided to put a light in the bowling ball area here as well, but just putting the lights onto this section of the city walk as well. And then after this, we will go ahead and start putting in the sidewalks. For the sidewalks, I went ahead and chose the Victorian tile that was in front of the theater because I liked the look of it. It was already there from the theater, and I felt like, you know, it just sort of fit. I'm using Victorian lights, so why not use the Victorian tile for the walking as well? Walking path. So here on this one, it is a fairly wide path, so I felt like it needed 2 lights along the way instead of just the single lights. Again, here all I do is I sort of copy them over, and then I do change them to be shining in the opposite direction. So instead of sort of the lights next to each other in a left and right way, these go the opposite direction so that they give a little bit more light on the ground. And you'll notice actually here in a little bit that I will do that with the other ones that go down the center of the path. I just turn them so that way they are actually going down the center of the path with a bit more light shining off on either side. But I do jump back and forth between tasks some. Here, as I said, I wanted to go ahead and start on the flooring. Originally, I was going to head over here and start over by the escalator, but then I realized, you know, what I wanted centered on is I wanted centered on the studios building here. I want to make sure that I've got it exactly where I want for that building and allow that building to dictate everything else. Because the entire purpose of this area was for the studios building, so it should dictate everything. And then basically I'm ensuring that I cover where the pathways are. If there's any kind of pathway showing, I just put an extra set of bricks down to make sure that it covers that area. I realized I hadn't put lights over here, so go ahead and take care of that for the restaurant. Then here, as I said, I start rotating these lights around just so that they're shining more to the sides and cast a little bit more light for the guests. Because again, this I have to treat almost differently than I would a park because this is going to be more of a 24-hour area. It's never going to close, and it's just going to be always open with the guests. As you can see there, I went ahead and did the curbs as I had talked about. And then what I'm doing here is just copying those curbs over so that way I can put them directly above some of the lights. And that way I can hopefully get all of the lights with them above them, and then I will sync them below the lights so that way they aren't visible, but they do work to stop guests from walking through the area. And then I'll just copy those lights with the curbs over, so that way we get straight down the middle here. Wasn't exactly straight, as you'll see at the end, so I do end up adjusting it slightly so that it sort of goes down the center more appropriately. And all I'm doing is also I'm using the last light in the line when I copy as where the first light in the new set goes, just to ensure that they are done fairly evenly and properly spaced. As I said, these lights down the middle, they're not exactly straight, but they are close, and so I was pleased with that. Here I'm just setting up the trash cans and the benches along the way to ensure that there's plenty of trash cans and plenty of seating for guests. I had noticed that there were a few guests that had thrown trash onto the ground and such, so I wanted to make sure that issue is eliminated. At this point, I've still got it where just as many guests as want to can come into the park. As you see down here by the Grand, it is getting a swarm of guests because of that. And as I said, once I sort of turned on the park to function, I found that it just wasn't working for me. But that would be a next video issue. Here, as I said, we're just putting in the tile floors. And right here, I wasn't able to get it to line up perfectly the way I'd want to with just putting in the normal tile, so I put in a specialized piece at each of those entrances just to make sure it's got the proper coverage where it needs to. This is a fairly simple process overall. It probably took me about half an hour's worth of time because of the fact that since I'm treating it as a single structure, they just line up next to each other really simply. The only pieces I had to sort of go special for is those ones in the doorways and such. And then here you're going to notice around these buildings, I do check to make sure that the heights are proper. Now right there by the movie theater, it's a slightly different height, but I'm okay with that. It's like just simply a little step up. But I wanted to make sure that the bathroom, the arcade, everything like that, it wasn't having sort of the one floor bleeding into the other, which like right there, it was having. So all I do is I raise the tile floor of the bathroom slightly just to make an adjustment. Same thing here in the coffee shop, having a little problem with the heights, so just adjusting it manually to make sure that it fits properly. For the bowling alley, again, had to put in some specialized tile, and then I even brought out the wood floor a little bit just so that that functioned properly. For the gift shop, it actually went under the other floor, so it worked out perfect for me. And same thing over here by the nightclub, it worked out where it went under, but it doesn't line up exactly with the corners of the nightclub concrete. So I do go back in, and on each of the corners I put in a specialized piece right here, just so that those corners get lined up properly. You won't see most of that piece of tile, but I wanted to put it in there anyways, just to try to get those details as fine as I could. As I said, really overall, I'm pretty pleased with this place. Now, I will say it is not completed yet. Because once the Universal or the Warner Brothers Studios park is done, I will start on another park, so I will add more to this place. For now, though, we're coming to the end of the episode, so if you enjoyed what I did in the episode, please go ahead and click that like button. If you've not already, please subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon, so they're aware when I produce new videos in the future. Thank you, and I hope to see you all again for more Planet Coaster.